On today's Locked On Jayhawks, biggest takeaways from the last two games of KU without Kevin McCullough. What is this Kansas team ceiling?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. We're joined by Nick Schwerdt on today's episode. Give him a follow at Nick_Schwerdt. Give me a follow at D Johnson Radio. I'm going to try to make it through this one with the losing voice. Happy Valentine's Day to anybody celebrating that and everything. First, we are brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Before we get into our action, talking biggest takeaways, ceiling of this team, and the curse of preseason number one for KU. Before we get to stat line is anyway, FanDuel Sportsbook, you can make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So KU gets trounced by Texas Tech, 29-point outing. And I've kind of been on this train of comparing this team to the 2018-2019 team for a while now. I think a lot of people caught up with that in this game to Texas Tech. They lose in Lubbock by 29, same deficit they lost by in 2018-2019. No Kevin McCullough the last two games, though, so there is tangible enough difference to be like, well, what if you get him back? But you have not been a big Kevin McCullough guy, and I wanted to get to the roots of this because I saw you post something about this on social media, but I wanted to kind of dig in a little bit further there. What is wrong with this team? Does it matter that Kevin McCullough has been out these last couple games? I guess take the floor.
No, I don't think it's I'm not trying to make it as in he's the issue. He's one of the top two players on this team. He's a top 10 player in college basketball. He's an All-American. He is very important to this team. I think what I probably did a poor job of explaining and where I'm kind of at is it's more about you take on the identity of your best players. I think a lot of times, whoever your leaders are, the guys who are at the top of the program, who have been there the longest, who are the most experienced, who are the best, other guys, the young guys, are going to look to them for guidance and experience. And I get that this is one of those things where when everything starts to go wrong, you start to just kind of find problems that may not be there because we're all looking for a solution. We're all trying to figure out what's the crux of why Kansas is struggling and where do we get there. I think both things can be true. Somebody like Kevin McCullough can be a great player and be one of your best players and be very important for your team's success while also acknowledging that maybe there is a problem in leadership. Maybe there isn't a guy on that court who can be sort of the alpha, who can be the guy to say, no, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to win. Maybe some of it's pseudo sports psychology, which I shouldn't be getting into, of reading body language, reading how guys talk to other players. How do you react to calls that you don't agree with? Some of that's when you're not winning, body language isn't going to be good. There's nobody out who's just yeah, this is great. This is awesome. So I totally understand that. But I think I'm kind of to the point now where I'm overanalyzing and finding things that aren't there because I just can't figure out why this team that has a lot of talent just continues to flounder on the road. How do you go from beating Houston as badly as you did at home and then 2 days later you look like you looked against Kansas State? And we can just rinse and repeat that same question week after week after week with this team. Look great at home, look terrible on the road. I don't know what gives.
So one thing that I think is interesting here, right now, this Kansas team is ranked 19th on KenPom. And if it finished that way, that would be the second worst team that Bill Self has had by that metric in his time at KU. The only one worse would be that 2021 team, which was actually ranked 18th, so ahead of this one until the blowout loss to USC. So this would be one of the worst teams, which is weird because I think you could almost make an argument this might be a top third, maybe starting five that Bill Self has had in his time at KU. And so it's weird when I'm discussing what is this team's ceiling, as much as I've compared it to maybe the 2018-2019 team, which, to be clear, that team also had some top wins. They beat Michigan State, who finished third in Ken Palm. They beat Tennessee, who finished 10th in Ken Palm that year. They had a couple wins over Texas, who was top 25. Iowa State, they beat, who was top 15 in Ken Palm. They beat Texas Tech, who finished 5th in Ken Palm that year, by 16 points. They beat Kansas State by 15 points. They finished top 20 in Ken Palm. Like, that team had some big wins similar to this one did. And you look at some of the comparisons with road struggles versus home splits. You had a big man who was a really good college player, but more of a college player, lumbering big man, Diedrich versus, Hunter here. Some young players, bench didn't come together. I think there are comparisons there. Yet I continue to be drawn to the idea that this team was never built for the regular season. With the lack of depth that they have, this team is more of a postseason team. And so if you're viewing it as just get Kevin healthy for the NCAA tournament, who cares what happens now? I know that is so conflicting to what we have learned with Bill Self and with winning Big 12 titles, but the streak isn't a thing anymore. And if you get a 3 seed, but then get everybody healthy, that's almost worth more than this year's team, limping their way to somehow winning a Big 12 title where you played Kevin McCullough through the injury. I don't know. I guess what I'm basically saying is I feel like the ceiling of this team is still like Final Four good. I don't know that I picked them to win a national title, but if I'm picking them that far, then I guess what's the difference? So what do you view the ceiling to be this team of? Like, what do you think would signify a good run in NCAA tournament play? And what do you think is a realistic, like, as far as they can go?
You see, that's difficult for me to answer, to say what's the ceiling versus what's realistic, because the ceiling is probably higher than what I think is realistic. Right? The ceiling is a Final Four run. What I think is realistic is probably Sweet 16, right? Make it to the second weekend. I said this on our podcast a couple of nights ago, right after the game, that when you look specifically at this offense and the game against Texas Tech, that was worst offensive performance combined with worst defensive performance. What's it look like? There's your answer. But specifically with the offense, you don't shoot threes. You don't get offensive rebounds, so you don't create extra possessions. You don't get to the free throw line, so you're not creating extra points there. You do one thing well. You score inside very efficiently. What happens when you don't do that? Which is basically to say, what happens when you don't have Hunter Dickinson? And he's had 2 bad offensive nights in a row. I'm not putting it on him, but like, this is what happens. This is what happens when the one thing you can hang your hat on isn't there for you. Then all of a sudden you look very, very average.
Isn't that weird though? Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Like, isn't it one thing to be like, hey, Devontae Graham went 2 of 10 from 3 tonight, just didn't have it. Isn't it weird to have that happen from like at the rim?
But think about it. You watch this team play and you see how other teams attack them defensively. We're going to throw 2 bodies. If you even look Hunter Dickinson's way, we're putting 2 bodies on him. And unfortunately, like in years past, when KU's had really good offensive big man guys who are great out of the post up, it's, oh, you're going to double team me. Boom. I'm going to hit this guy. He's going to knock down a 3. I'm going to kick it out. You're going to overhelp. And then this guy's going to drive in and score at the rim. This team doesn't have the athletes on the perimeter to get inside and score. They don't have the shooters to keep defenses honest. There isn't a good plan B for this offense. I think the other thing about it is when you think about how Hunter Dickinson scores, Bill Self, we know, great at getting post touches. Post ups, even though like somebody told me KU's in the 99th percentile in post up efficiency, which is like, hey, they're really good at this. That's great, but post ups in the pantheon of basketball shots are one of the least efficient ways to score. So the thing that you're really good at isn't the best thing to be really good at. You'd much rather have a team that's really good at knocking down open threes or getting transition opportunities, easy layups at the rim. Like, there's a difference between the way that Hunter Dickinson scores and getting an uncontested layup, right? So it's not that this team is terrible offensively. It's that their margin for error is so razor thin because there is no good answer to what happens when defenses take that thing away, with that thing being Hunter Dickinson. What is the answer? If the answer is like Kevin McCullough knocking down threes, that's kind of hit or miss, or like getting open shots at the rim, who does it? Like, who's the guy you trust when the main thing isn't working for you? And we're a month left in the season, and I don't think anybody has a good answer for that.
All right, let's talk about where KU went wrong then, and maybe this curse of being preseason number one for KU, whose stat line is it anyway still to come. This episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams, college basketball teams, quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. You can get in on futures, who's going to win the NCAA tournament, make the Final Four. You can bet on somebody to win the Big 12. I think Texas Tech, Iowa State have good value there, looking at their upcoming schedule. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, KU has a weird thing going on when they're preseason number one. I don't know if you've looked at this, but I was going back and
I can think of two. I can think of two teams.
Oh, there's more. There's more. So since 2004, there have been 20 preseason number one teams. I guess 21, but I'm not going to count the one of whoever it was the year that the NCAA tournament was canceled. I think that might have been Michigan State that year. I can't remember. But it doesn't matter. Didn't have an NCAA tournament, so I'm not going to apply that to the data. So for the teams that have not been named KU over the last 2 decades who have been preseason AP number one, 13 of the 15 made the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. And 7 of the 15 made it to a Final Four. So you have this large group of teams who, when they are preseason number one, they're like really good, which I don't know. I mean, I know, us as media and people who predict things, like we're not good at predicting things, but like that's actually a very good track record, And so for the most part, it has worked for teams. But for Kansas, they've been it 3 times. This is their 4th in the last 2 decades. They've never made a second weekend as the preseason number one.
So, okay, let me guess here. So yeah. One of those years was the year with Wiggins and Embiid, right? They were preseason number one that season in 2014?
No, they were not that year.
Okay, well, I know 2019 they were with Diedrich and Grimes and Dotson. Correct. And all those guys. When else were they? 2009? 2010, 2010?
2009 to 2010. Now, that one I do feel a little cheapish.
Well, yeah, because that was a great team.
They just got sniped. That was just an NCAA tournament weird thing, right?
So what's the other one? 2015 or something?
The other one was Self's second year. It was 04-05, and they ended up losing in the first round.
That was a team where the wheels kind of fell off at the end. Like they were really, really good all season long, and then they kind of came apart down the stretch. Like they'd lost a bunch of games at the end of regular season. I can't remember if Simeon was injured. I feel like he was always injured. Sorry, I kind of just jumped in. Was there a question there? I just kind of
no. I mean, do you make anything of that? Is there something to the idea that when these other teams are getting preseason number one, there's something different than what KU is doing? Like the years that they've been preseason number one, is there something you look at and you're like, well, maybe that's a little bit of fool's gold, or I don't know. Is that just bad luck? I don't know.
Well, if I think of 2024 and 2019, like that to me is more apt because 2010, that team was really great. They had a bad game in the tournament. I don't think there's anything to learn about that team. Like, oh, they weren't as good as we thought. No, we got 4 months of them being one of the best teams in the country. So, and they were number one in the tournament, right? They were number one overall seed.
Yeah.
In the tournament. Like at no point was anybody like, this team's not any good. 2005, that was an experienced team. I think the easiest thing to point to would just be it was Bill Self's second year. And you go talk to some of those guys. Go talk to Keith Langford. Go talk to Wayne. Wayne Simeon doesn't really talk like this anymore, but he used to. Those guys didn't like Bill Self. Like it's very obvious. They were run and gun, fastest team in the country under Roy Williams. In comes Bill Self, who's like, yeah, none of that anymore. We're going to play defense. That's not what we came here to do, coach. Like, so I want to push that one aside. Like those guys did not like Keith Langford. Derek, when we were working together, we had Keith Langford on the show, and I asked him, I go, if you could have done anything over, what would you have done? And he said, I would have left earlier. He said, I would have left after my junior year. I mean, come on. So push that aside. Let's just compare this to the 2019 team, because that's really what this is about. Like, we can do the preseason number one, but even if you're doing that, you think about it like you're just comparing 4 different teams. We can lump in all the other teams, but really, what are the common factors here with the 4 Kansas teams? And with this team and that 2019 team, a lot of nice pieces on paper didn't end up being as nice when you put them on the court together.
Not just pieces on paper, player acquisitions, right? Transfers coming in, freshmen coming in, KJ Lawson, Charlie Moore, right? Guys that didn't hit this year. It's Marco Jackson, Nick Timberlake. I think sometimes we get caught up in shiny new thing, and it's not always better.
Yeah, it's like guys you thought were going to be special. And I think the biggest one is Marco Jackson. I'm not trying to put this on him, but because you lost Arterio Morris, who you thought was going to be even better than Marco Jackson. But you go out and you get a McDonald's All-American, and they don't end up being the dude you thought you were going to get. It's not nothing. That's not just like, oh yeah, the freshman's not good right away. It's like, we have this expectation now. McDonald's All-American, he was getting one and done love before the season. You just expect them to be key pieces.
Should we anymore, though? Because think about the track record now. Marco this year,
I know.
MJ Rice year before. Bryce Thompson year before.
Ernest Uday. Ernest Uday was a McDonald's All-American.
Right? It feels like there's at least one every year that's going to overperform, like maybe a Christian Brown this year, or Johnny Furphy, and then there's one every year that's going to way underperform. I think you just go into the offseason expecting that now.
Yeah, I think there's something to, because I think about the best ones, the best one and dones, or the best freshmen. Grady's honestly up there.
Sure.
Grady last year, but Josh Jackson for me is number one. Andrew Wiggins was great. Ben McLemore was great, even though he had been in the system for a year.
Xavier.
I mean, like, God, if you had Kelly Oubre on this team, you know what you would kill to have a guy like Kelly Oubre, who we don't think of as being one of the better ones. I think there are certain players where their talent is just so high that it's going to shine through. I think for a lot of these guys, it's like maybe they're not as good as we thought they were going to be. Because I would also argue, Derek, that like most of the guys who transfer after 1 year at Kansas, like Quentin Grimes is the exception of the dudes who go on to have success elsewhere. Most of these guys, they just go on and it's like, you missed. Like the guy wasn't, that he wasn't a McDonald's All-American. He wasn't a one and done candidate. He just wasn't that good. I'll be honest. I shared this take the other day, and now we're kind of getting off topic. I shared this take the other day, and I said to the person I was talking to, I said, this is probably the worst time for me to debut this take. But in the midst of that drubbing down in Lubbock on Monday night, I found myself walking away from that game saying, you know what? I kind of like what I saw from El Marco. He was getting to his spot. He was knocking down a couple of those jumpers. And I think what it really is more than anything else is you do see sometimes, even though he doesn't hit many shots, like you do see what he has that the other guys don't. Like he has that quick first step, get past his guy, pull up from 18 feet. Now, he's laid a lot of bricks doing that. But that, truthfully, Derek, like that's the skill set that this team needs. Oh, Hunter double teamed, has to kick it out. Now there's 10 seconds on the clock. Somebody's just got to beat their man one-on-one and get to a spot and knock down a jumper. He's the only guy who really has the quickness, the explosiveness to do that. Unfortunately, he just can't execute it. So I think what I really found by watching him on Monday night was just like, going back to the original question, like, what's this team's ceiling? Their ceiling's a Final Four, but like, you can't have him be a zero. You can't have him be a negative. Like that guy, push aside Nicholas Timberlake. I never thought he was going to be a dude. Like Towson, oh, you like to shoot threes and not play defense? Good luck playing for Bill Self. But like your best players have to be your best players. I think El Marco is still one of the most skilled players on this team. He's probably in his head at this point. But if you can get something out of him, I think that kind of changes the outlook for what this team can do in March.
All right, let's finish up. Whose stat line is it anyway? First, we are brought to you by Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite sporting event should not be stressful. With Gametime, you can get fast and easy tickets to all your favorite events, whether it's sports, music, comedy, theater near you. They have killer deals on last-minute tickets, and their lowest price guarantee means you can stop stressing over buying the tickets, start getting hyped for the fun that you're going to be having. You can get exclusive flash deals on tickets for all sorts of sports. And with the Game Time guarantee, you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Finishing things up, whose stat line is it anyway? First up, this player has a 21.3% free throw rate, which ranks 39th among 48 qualified Big 12 players.
I think I know this. I don't know the exact number, but I tweeted about this during the game, so I'm just going to go with my gut. Is it Hunter Dickinson?
It is Hunter Dickinson, and it felt like Bill Self's technical was about this.
It's honestly shocking that a guy who gets as many touches as he does, and beyond that, gets as double teamed, gets played as defensively as he does, doesn't get calls. Now, don't take this as me saying he's getting screwed over. Why aren't they calling more fouls on him? I know a lot of people are having that take, and I'm not even saying that's necessarily wrong. It's just shocking to see the numbers. Like, for a guy who gets as many touches as he does and plays the way he does, you just like associate that with someone who's going to take 6 to 8 free throws a night, and he just doesn't get it. I don't know what it is. Is it that he's skinny? Is he being skinny shamed? Is it that he's not flailing enough? Like, is he not selling the fouls? I really don't understand it.
Well, here's what's interesting. He has 3 years of track record in Michigan, right? So 21.3% free throw rate this year. Last year in Michigan, it was 36.9%. Year before it was 27.2. Year before it was 42.5. So is it just the Big 12? They just are cool with people like suplexing each other in the post?
I don't get it. It really doesn't make any sense. Like, I mean, if you could just take Udoka Azubuike's free throw rate with Hunter Dickinson's game, I mean, he might actually beat Zach Edey for best player in the country. And I saw a lot of people talking about that too, the way that like Zach Edey gets calls and Hunter Dickinson just doesn't. That would, hey, I'll tell you what, that would make this offense look a hell of a lot better. If he started getting to the free throw line 6 to 8 times a night, like all of a sudden, your offense is going to look a lot more impressive.
I just gasped looking at Zach Edey's free throw rate. Have you seen it?
No, I know it's higher.
Oh, it is much higher. How about 4 times higher? 84.4. How is that even?
What?
How?
80, that seems like a video game number.
That doesn't seem real. All right, next one. Kansas does not have a single player in the top 12 in the Big 12 for individual block rate. This number goes back to 2014. When is the last time that happened for a Bill Self team?
That they didn't have a
single player in the top 12
player in block rate in the conference. Okay, let me just go back through the years. Okay, Jeff, you said it goes back to 2014? Okay, so 2014 would have been Embiid. I think he would have been top 12. 2015.
Embiid was second. Wiggins was 11th.
2015 might be a good one because Cliff Alexander probably didn't qualify. He didn't play enough. And then the other guys in that team were Hunter Mickelson, who I think Hunter Mickelson actually had a low-key good block rate, but it was just the best on the team. So I don't know if it was actually good. That's the leader in the clubhouse. 2016. God, I don't even know who it would have been on that team. That was Perry.
2016, you still would have had the same cast of big men.
Yeah, so I think it's one of those 2 years. I think it's 2015 or 2016.
It's actually a trick question. The correct answer is none of them. It has never happened before. It is happening this year, though.
You son of a gun.
The closest ones, KJ Adams was 11th last year. Landon Lucas was 11th in 2017. That 2015 one was Jamari Traylor. He was 9th. And then David McCormick was 10th in 2022.
I think I underestimate the fact that even if you're 12th, you're not exactly killing it. You know what I mean? So to not be top 12, it's pretty shocking. It's pretty shocking. And you have a 7'2" dude on the team, man. Like, I don't know what his actual height is, but like he's too tall to not be getting blocks.
Yeah, weird number. I think there is something there about, I don't know. maybe effort on the defensive end a little bit. You know, I think it's fair to ask.
Sorry, say it again. I lost audio on you.
No, I think it's fair to ask about, I don't know, maybe effort level on the defensive end. How are you 7-2 not getting 2 blocks a game, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think he's necessarily overtly concerned with defense. So, and you know what? We'll take what he gives us on offense, but
Yeah.
at this point, we need everything we can get.
All right. He's Nick Schwert. Where can people check out your work right now?
Podcast is Could Be Wrong. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts.
All right. Give me a follow at D Johnson Radio. That'll do it for us today on Locked On Jayhawks. See you next time.